Hey everybody, welcome to Uproot, the podcast, a space that has been created for us to have a holistic conversation about our health and our wellness. Here on Uproot, we speak from three different angles: psychology, biology, and theology. The study of the mind, the study of the body, and the study of the Bible. I'm your host, Eric Daniel, and I want to thank you all so much for joining me for another episode of Uproot, the podcast. So today, as you can see, we have a special guest. This is my wife. This is my beautiful wife, Brittni Williams. And so I asked her to come on this episode with me today because this is our very first segment of Ask the Therapist. And for those of you that don't know, my wife is also a therapist.
Can you imagine our conversations?
I know, right? We're going to talk about it. We're going to get into it. So,
Thank you for having me.
Of course.
I appreciate it. You the real one.
So actually my wife finished school the same month that I started school. So she's about 2.5 years ahead of me, and she is so like this much closer to taking her licensure exam.
Dun, dun, dun.
Dun, dun, dun.
Yeah.
To become a licensed marriage and family therapist. How does that feel?
Unreal a little bit. It's kind
Uh-huh.
of like you've been working your whole life for
Yeah.
like this like big achievement, and like now that it's like super close, like I'm just waiting for the BBS. Anytime BBS wants to get back to me, let me know. It's kind of unreal. So I'm very excited to be licensed because I will be licensed. And I'm excited to just set off my career. So I think it'll be good.
Amen. Setting off the career and all that goodness.
Yeah.
Setting off your career, I mean, you're already in it.
I am. I work.
Let's tell the people what you do.
Okay, so I am a associate marriage and family therapist and an associate professional clinical counselor. So I work in Sacramento. I work with the homeless population, and I've been doing that for about 4 years, so a really long time. And then I work at 2 different private practices. I work at a private practice in Sacramento called Prestige. And then I work at one here in Manteca called Sol y Luna. So I work at 2 different private practices, a outpatient mental health facility. So yeah, I'm busy.
What does Sol y Luna stand for?
Sun and light or sun and moon.
Yeah.
Don't come for me. I knew you were going to try to
I was going to test you to see how your Spanish is. So she's already out there. You can... So I was going to tell them, but tell the people how they can connect with you if they are looking for therapy from a licensed professional.
They can go to psychologytoday.com. It is a website that is nationally known for all psychologists or therapists. I'm on there. You can look my name up, Brittni Williams. It's TTNI, by the way. You can find me on Instagram. I do have a therapist Instagram. I don't mind giving out my personal number if you want to DM me on the side. That's fine too.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Awesome. So yes, this is why I decided to have her on this episode with me, because she is also a therapist. So she's going to be able to give some insight on some of the questions that have been written in, that have been DM'd and all those good things, and going to give us some really good insight. So babe, thank you for joining me today.
Thanks for having me, honey.
You're welcome. This won't be the last time.
I hope not.
So I have the questions here.
Okay.
And so I'm gonna read some of the questions.
Okay.
And we're just gonna talk about them a little bit. Okay.
All right.
The very first one that came in, which we're just gonna keep them all anonymous. But the very first one that came in is, what are different types of therapist or therapy, and what can they offer?
Oh, good question. So there are lots of different therapists out there. There are therapists that specialize in certain things. So there are therapists that, like for me, example, I'm certified in DBT, which stands for dialectical behavioral therapy.
I was going to say, you got to let the people know.
Yeah, dialectical
means.
behavioral therapy. So that is basically the construct of managing your like emotions and
Okay.
regulating those emotions, kind of having a healthier relationship with others. So DBT is normally working with individuals who have the diagnosis of like BPD, which is borderline personality disorder.
So y'all, let me tell y'all. So she in the field, okay? So she gonna be throwing out these acronyms, and I'm going make sure I remind her to tell
Slow
the
it down.
people,
Okay.
tell the people what them acronyms mean. So DBT,
Yes.
dialectical behavioral therapy.
Yes.
And I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, so that's another that's like a therapeutic modality. There's like narrative therapy, which is basically in empowering a client to kind of eternalize their story but make it their own and finding their voice and
Okay.
understanding like who they are. A lot of times in therapy, people come in, they don't know like who they are or why they do the things that they do. And so narrative therapy helps people understand them, but also give them a voice in changing their story.
I love that. That's one of my favorite things about narrative therapy is that we spend time in helping clients externalize the situations that they've been going through, because a lot of times we hold that stuff in, right? And so the therapeutic way of saying that is internalizing it, right? So we hold it in and we don't talk about it, but narratives gives people the space and the opportunity to externalize, to bring that story outside of themselves, that they're not the things that they've been through.
Yeah, and it helps them deconstruct cognitive distortions. So what a cognitive distortion is basically like the way our minds think, and like if we think, oh, I'm always going to be a bad person, that's a distortion. Like you're not always going, like cognitive distortions are usually like always and never. So
Right.
those absolutes, right? And so we try to do our best to deconstruct those within narrative therapy, because it's not always going to be an always. It's not always going to be a never. Why are you smiling at me?
Because I like to see you like this.
Oh, thank you.
Okay. Awesome. Yes. Okay. Sorry, I'm gonna try to stay focused.
Okay,
I
stay
don't know if you
focused.
should have been my first guest.
Stay focused on the mission.
All right. Okay. Yes. So that's narrative therapy. And so some of the other ones that I wanted to touch on
What are you
that
like?
that I'm looking forward in becoming certified in, because so one of the things is I haven't really mentioned it on here yet, but my focus is going to be trauma. Like I want to be considered a trauma therapist. And so one of the main modalities, if we want to look at it that way, and modalities are just different types of therapy, is EMDR. And so EMDR stands for eye movement desensitization. Eye movement
Desensitization movement.
Why is it?
I don't know what the R stands for.
It's
Let's
reprocessing. That's what it is. Eye movement
great.
desensitization reprocessing. I've been saying this thing forever, and
Listen, it's okay.
I get in front of the camera and just mess up.
We understand.
It'd
The
be
people,
like that.
they don't.
All right. And so what I love about this is, again, it's almost with a narrative in the sense it allows you to tell your story. But what it does is it almost takes you back to that moment and helps you to reprocess the information that you're receiving from that traumatic experience, so that you no longer are triggered by the things that may have triggered you before. It goes deeper than that, but I just, just for... just give us some basics of it, because in order for you to even be trained in EMDR, you have to.
Don't you have to do it yourself?
You have to go through the training. You have to go through EMDR therapy, and then you have to be supervised for a certain amount of hours before you can be considered.
Oh, see, I didn't even know all that.
Yeah, it's intense. So they really want to make sure that people that are giving that type of therapy are well versed and skilled in that.
Well, yeah, I think that's important, because a lot of times therapists are walking around still being triggered, and they don't even know that they're being triggered.
Listen.
Oh, sorry.
No, you good.
Okay.
I was just gonna say, it brought me back to one of the things that I loved about our program is that we were required to get our own 20 hours of therapy.
And let me tell you, I was so thankful for the therapist that I have had. And my last one recently, Takira, if you ever watch this, she's amazing. But when you get a therapist that will stick with you and that will hold you accountable to your journey of healing, I feel like that's so important, because people say, well, go to therapy. And then, some therapists like, yeah, come in, but they won't hold you accountable. They won't challenge you on your thoughts. And I think that's really important. So
For sure.
yeah,
For
I
sure.
think that was one of the best things about our graduate program is that they made us go to therapy.
Yeah. We went to the same school, but my school is under a more prestigious name.
You know what?
Than hers.
Man of God. First
so
of all,
she went to Brandman University.
Thank you, Brandon.
And I went to the University of Massachusetts Global.
Yeah, but yours was more like mine was smooth sailing. You have more issues.
Low key.
Okay, so don't even come for Brandman like that because you have way more issues than I did, and I had to help you through.
And you did eat at both sides. She helped. Listen, y'all. She helped me through. So the other therapeutic modality that I love is acceptance and commitment therapy.
That's a good one.
This one actually was something that was beneficial. I learned a lot about this while I was in school. And so what I liked about this one is it gives you the opportunity to acknowledge whatever the experience was, acknowledge the impact that it had on you, and forces you to do something different.
Yeah.
Like the acceptance part is like, yeah, this happened. Like, yeah, I have these thoughts. Yeah, I have these behaviors.
Okay.
Right? But then the commitment is committing to a different action.
Committing to the process, committing to doing something different. So yes, you've had this experience. We've acknowledged that you've been through this experience. We acknowledge that you might have these thoughts. We acknowledge that you might have these behaviors. But then it goes deep into values. And it talks about how when we're committing to a different action, that those commitments stem from values. They align with those values.
Yeah, it aligns with the values of things that's to the core of who we are.
Yeah.
And so when I learned about that in school, that set me on fire.
You know what's so funny? My recent therapist, within our first 2 or 3 sessions, she was like, "What are your values?" And I was like, literally, I was like, I don't. Oh my! I don't. So I had to really think and have some serious reflections on what is valuable, what is my core values, and I over time I realized I have a top 5, a top 10, right?
Yeah.
But values are important.
They are, and they really govern how we live life. And
we don't realize
we
it.
don't.
No,
we don't.
sorry.
If we don't, no, you're good. If we don't take the time to really ask ourselves, what do you value most? The way that I think about it is, if everything was gone, what would be something that I would hold on to?
My family.
Right?
That's my first one.
Family.
Yeah.
Family. Yeah.
Okay.
Good. So there's this is not an exhaustive list of the different type of therapies and different type of therapeutic modalities, because there's so many more out there. But we just wanted to spend a little time on a couple that we really enjoy.
Yeah. They're important. And I was in grad school, and I don't know if you remember this, but during my professor, when we were about to get married, and I had the professor who was the sex therapist.
We were married.
Were we married?
We were married.
No, we weren't married because
we
we were getting ready. We weren't married yet. We were engaged.
And
she was prepping. She was like, "Now, Brittni, when you get ready to get married,
that's right.
You need to have all these conversations."
Yeah.
So there's even sex therapists.
Yeah. So there's sex therapists. There's trauma therapists. There's
oh, child. There's every kind
there's
of therapist.
There's a lot.
You can do play therapy.
Play therapy.
You can do. I know that there's some therapists who really like to be in nature. So you can find by grounding and mindfulness techniques, they go out in nature and they do that. So
there's a somatic therapy as well. Somatic therapists, those are people that really deal with how trauma is stored in the body. So certain parts of the body they might massage, or they might do a pressure point or something like that, because it helps to release certain traumas that's held up in the body. So that's a pretty cool one too.
Yeah. It's up there.
It's a whole lot.
It's a whole lot of them.
Yeah. All right, so let's go to the next one.
Okay. This is fun.
So and keep in mind, we are gonna do Ask the Therapist once a month. So after seeing this, if things come in, send them in. Send in your questions. Send in the different things. So the next question that I have is there a difference between having moments of anxiety and being diagnosed with anxiety disorder?
Yes. I think so. When you look at anxiety disorder, or what they call generalized anxiety disorder, or social anxiety, there's different preferences, right? So you got to think about for someone who has been diagnosed with, you have social anxiety. it's not just like, oh, I can just give this to you. You have to there's certain criteria that you have to meet. So like, now I don't have the DSM with me, so I don't know all the certain criteria. So don't hold me to it. But
it's
right behind me.
That's okay.
Okay, we ain't gonna do that. Yeah. But so for example, like for people who have social anxiety, they're extremely paranoid. They don't like to be around big crowds of people or like to hear like loud voices or noises or things like that, right? But that's on a consistent pattern. And then so when you get a diagnosis or when you're exhibiting some type of symptoms, it's a symptom that inhibits a functional impairment that you have.
Creates a functional impairment. Yep.
Right. So for example, like if I have anxiety or social anxiety, I refuse or I will avoid at all costs to go out in the public.
Right.
So that's why we have a lot of people who do Bedside Baptist Church on Sunday
Ooh,
mornings.
Wait.
But in reality,
wait. I didn't know we was going there. Okay.
Sorry.
Okay.
You told me I could be my authentic
I love it.
self.
Do your thing.
So yes, going back to your original question, yes, there's a difference between having just anxiety, because anybody can be anxious.
Yes,
Like,
right. We all have it.
Everybody is anxious for something, if not for nothing. So yes, I think there's a difference.
Yeah.
And I think we can acknowledge that.
Yeah, I think the key thing there is that it causes a functional impairment, and usually those functional impairments are in occupation, so like your job,
School.
relationships,
Yeah.
school, and then relationships. So that could be like with friends, with family members, things like that. Usually, if you're seeing some type of impairment, and by impairment means your inability to engage, right? Usually that might be some signs or symptoms of you having a diagnosis or a potential diagnosis.
Yeah, but let's just clarify too. Just because someone gives you a diagnosis does not mean that you will have that diagnosis forever.
Right.
Like when I see my therapy clients, I don't even like in private practice, I don't like to give them a diagnosis. And I've had people be like, "What's my diagnosis?" And I'm like, "Can I be honest with you? Like you exhibit certain symptoms of this particular diagnosis. However, I don't like to label that on you. And a lot of times insurances want that because that's how they can, show that there's a reason why you're in therapy. And yes, I get it. It's important.
Yeah.
But like that, sometimes those labels, they stick with you.
Yeah.
Forever. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So like if someone's going around like, well, I'll always just be like we talked about last week, like being bipolar. Like that's a huge stigma to just like, I'm bipolar.
Right.
Like, no, like we can have moments and definitely seasons, and you can be like diagnosed with it. But I'm very careful when giving that type of, and it's such a heavy diagnosis.
You know what
I mean?
And you know what? I think I've noticed too that a lot of people, when they are so hungry for them diagnosis, it's because of some underlying things, right? And yes, of course, like with insurance, we have to give a diagnosis because that's how they're gonna get that's how they're gonna pay us.
Yeah, and please pay me.
Right, that's how they're gonna pay us, is if we give them a diagnosis. But the cool thing, the cool thing is moving into a more postmodern way of doing therapy. A lot of postmodern therapists don't necessarily work off of diagnoses. We more so work off of, what are the goals? What is it that you want to accomplish?
Yeah. And that's important. Come into therapy with like what you are struggling with and like be ready. Yeah.
And so going back to the very beginning of the question, is there a difference between having anxiety and a anxiety disorder? Yes, of course there is. However, I will also say we might work on addressing them the same way.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I was anxious to come into this podcast.
Yeah. And we did some coping skills. Told you to pray. She went into the mirror and did some positive affirmations.
I sure did. I was like, girl, you got this.
So, So I hope that was helpful to the individual that had written into that.
Yeah.
Okay. So this is another one. So this is not a general question. This is specific.
Okay.
So again, I'm going to keep this individual anonymous. Okay. But they wrote in and said, I think I'm still stuck in my past, and I don't know how to get through my days when I randomly experience a trigger that comes on its own unintentionally. Then fear, and my mind creates a similar experience with my current day.
Okay.
And I can't get out. I can't get back to reality knowing I'm safe, but I'm afraid. And then they wrote something else, then I don't have to. go into that. So essentially, this individual is having challenges with being triggered from past situations. And when that happens, they have a hard time getting back to reality.
Yeah.
So we could talk about your experience as a therapist. What would you say to someone that comes in and they're like, I feel like I'm stuck in the past. I'm having a hard time getting back to reality when that happens.
Okay, so the first question that pops in my mind, and whoever wrote this question, you may know me or you may not know me, so know my heart in this. But as a therapist, I'm gonna challenge you. I'm not gonna just let us sit and dwell in some misery, right? So for me, I would ask, like, do you want to move forward?
Okay.
Because I think there's a lot of times where we are ruminating and we are dwelling in the past, and yet it's almost comfortable. Like it's a sense of comfort for us to, like, well, this will always just be my trauma, or this will always just be a part of me. And so sometimes we don't acknowledge it.
Yeah.
We don't acknowledge the fact that we're struggling in this area. So that'd be my first question. Like, do you really want to let it go?
Yeah.
You know my saying, like, get the Disney spirit and the Elsa anointing and let it go. Like, we got to let that thing go. So that'd be my first question.
Yeah.
The second thing I would say or do is, what have you done in the past to help get over it?
Yeah, help manage
it. Get through it,
yeah.
right? Man, that was kind of harsh, get over it. But to get through it, to manage what you're experiencing, what have you done in the past? And if that is not working, what are you willing to try to do something differently? Have you gone and sought a therapist?
Yeah, and let's just hold right there too.
Okay.
I want to say, and I probably should have mentioned this on the first episode, Uproot is not therapy. Okay. I don't want this to be like, oh, I got my therapy fixed this week because I went and watched Uproot. That's not what this is about. And I appreciate y'all writing in, and I want y'all to continue to write in and ask these questions, and also keep in mind that this isn't. I wouldn't even say. Well, this is definitely not your primary source of therapy. I wouldn't even say it's your secondary source of therapy, maybe a third or fourth. But I would really encourage you to seek out a therapist, seek out a professional to help out.
Yeah, I always tell people who are super hesitant to go to therapy, what's 3 sessions gonna kill you? What's it gonna do to you?
Right.
Like, and a lot of times there's not a lot of safe people in our lives, and we need safe people. And a therapist comes in and they bring an outside perspective. They don't know you.
Yeah.
They don't know the people in your life. They have nothing to really judge you off of, and their job is to help walk you through certain things.
Yeah.
And so I see there's no harm in trying therapy. Now, some people say therapy is not for me, and I'm always like, well, have you tried it?
Right.
Like,
how you know it's not for you if you
exactly.
haven't tried it?
It's like almost like I don't like a certain food. Have you ever had it? Well, no, I've never taken. Okay, well, so you really don't know. You're just going off of what other people have told you or what you've seen, right? So I think seeking out a therapist is important.
Yeah.
And then I don't know. I feel like acknowledging that, like, you need help. Like, there's got to be some type of, like, insight and acknowledgement, like, I'm not okay.
Yeah.
Like, this, whatever I'm doing, my behavior, me being triggered, is not okay. And I need to get that figured out. And I think it's important, if you like, to get it figured out for yourself.
Right.
Like, do this for you.
For you.
For you. I go to therapy for me. Now that I'm married and I got my baby, like, I'm trying to break certain things. Yeah. But I essentially go to therapy for myself. Yeah. And it's important. And it's so helpful. So that's what I would say. I mean, I'm not sure if that's like good. The most therapeutic answer, but
no, you're good. You're good. I think for me, what I would say to this individual, if they're struggling with the past, is give yourself time to process what it is that's coming up, like what it is that you're experiencing.
Yeah.
I think, and so for those of you that are watching, y'all know that, like, a lot of our conversation has to do with the church as well.
And church hurt is real.
Yeah. Yeah. And so for this, I think sometimes we tend to feel like the more we ignore something,
Mm-hmm.
the easier it is for us to move past it, right? Or like if I don't think about this, I'm just gonna pray about it and just forget. Pray
Yeah.
about it and forget. And I think sometimes that can work. However, other times, especially if it has to do with trauma,
Mm-hmm.
that can only work for so long.
Yeah.
Or you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so I think with this situation, I would encourage this person to really allow themselves to figure out what it is that's triggering them, one, and why that's triggering them.
Mm-hmm.
And then I would again go to a therapist. Go talk to a therapist because and the thing with a therapist, like sitting with a therapist, is different. Like it's different than just sitting and talking with friends because there's certain interventions and techniques and strategies that we can use to help you process what's really going on.
Yeah.
For and so I would really encourage that. I think. Especially as it relates to trauma. Like, I don't think trauma is something that people should just try to deal with on their own.
No, never. Never.
It can be, it's hard.
It's too hard.
For anybody.
Yeah, it's way too hard.
For anybody.
Yeah, I think, and something that our brains do that I think is so crazy, but it's the way how God has wired us, is when we experience a traumatic event, sometimes what our brains will do is shut off that memory. And when our bodies are like, okay, I'm ready to deal.
I feel safe.
I'm okay. We begin to remember those things. And sometimes when those memories start popping up, they're like, what is going on with me?
Yeah, what is this? Yeah.
I have a certain client right now, and I had told them, I say, look, we're going to talk about this. I want you to be prepared, though. In the next 3 to 4 weeks, if you start having dreams or if certain smells start like coming to your memory and it's taking you back, that's a part of you dealing with your trauma.
Yeah.
And they came back and they were like, okay, so I didn't know it was going to be like that. And I was like, I tried to warn you. And we had to work through that, and we're continuing to work through that.
Yeah.
But don't do it alone. Like trauma is never meant to be worked through alone. And so seeing a therapist, going to see someone is very beneficial.
And don't just throw around that word trauma either. I know I said it a few times, but I think there are like, and I talk about this concept of pop psychology. I heard it from I'll call him a fellow podcaster as well. His name's Matthew Hernandez, and he does a podcast called Worthwell, I believe. And he had said something about pop psychology, which is this concept of like people on the internet are glamorizing trauma. Like people are going on and creating TikToks and certain things about, oh, when I'm triggered by my childhood trauma, whatever, like making it like it's glamorized.
Funny.
Yeah.
It's funny, yeah.
And so I say be careful with that because trauma's a real thing.
It is.
And it takes a certain amount of energy to be able to process it, acknowledge it, and take it on.
Yeah, to work
take
through
it on. Thank you. To work through it. I saw someone a few months ago. They had posted something that said, "Real men face their traumas and emotions," and it was a lady, and I had commented on that. I said, respectfully,
well,
if you've never,
my God,
I said respectfully, if you've never gone through the
trauma
work of dealing with your trauma, you can't speak on this because trauma's not easy for anybody to talk about and anybody to process through.
Well, and that's the other thing. We try to compartmentalize trauma. Like, and we try, sometimes even individuals, they'll post their trauma. Like, what are we doing? Like, that, I don't need to know about that. But like go see someone. Go see a professional. And let me just say, I've always been a firm believer as we are pastors, as we are therapists. I always say Jesus and therapy work together. They go hand in hand. Yeah. I'm a firm believer in that. I am a pastor, but I'm also a therapist. And I am a firm believer that Jesus and therapy can
and do.
My God.
Oh, bye. See, listen.
See, we can't do this. They work together.
They work together.
And I'm so thankful that we incorporate that in our daily lives, honestly, but they go hand in hand. Yeah. And here's the thing. I'm not saying that Jesus can't come and deliver you.
Because he will.
He can and he will, and he's done it before.
He has.
Don't play with my God. Like,
Hallelujah.
He can. But I also believe that if we are made in his image and his likeness, there are things that he has given us tools on how to process those things. And I think sometimes he's very intentional. God said he's a very intentional God. And so sometimes we can acknowledge something and work through something and then go to prayer and be like, okay, so God, how do I change this?
Yeah.
How do God, I need you to
Right.
rectify me. I need you to speak to me when if I'm triggered at work, or if I'm about to see this family member and you know how I feel about them. Like Jesus and therapy go hand in hand.
They do, and they will forever.
Amen. What's your other question?
And they will forever. So I hope that helped.
Yeah.
To the individual that wrote that in, I hope that helped. Again, allow yourself to, again, first go to therapy, and then allow yourself to take yourself through the process of processing what it is that's happening, processing those triggers, and helping, allowing yourself to go through that, because it's going to take time. It's not something that we can just get over in a day or so. But continue to pray. Continue to seek God.
Yes.
Continue to ask God to give you direction and how the right therapist as well, because there are Holy Ghost Spirit-filled therapists out there that can and will support you and help you through your process. So I encourage you to do that. Seek the Lord in that. In all of our things, in all the things that we do, acknowledge God, and he's going to direct us. So there's that. Sorry, I was about to get
excited.
Listen, it's Holy Week. Listen, quit.
Hey, listen.
It's Holy Week. Stop it.
Okay, good. What's the next question?
My God. Okay, so the next question is, okay, so I like this question because I think it's one of those things that people think about, but they don't often speak out loud. And so the question is, can a white therapist help someone who's black, or a non-black therapist help a black person, right? And there's a second part to that question that this individual asked. They asked, can a therapist, and I want to make sure I read it correctly, can a therapist help someone with something they themselves, as in the therapist themselves, have not gone through themselves? Okay?
That's a hard question.
Is it hard, though?
That second part is definitely hard.
You think so?
I think let's go to your first question.
First question. Okay. Can a white or non-black therapist help a black person, a black client?
I think they can. I think we have to be able to acknowledge, like, I am black and you are not. So my experiences are going to be completely different. Yeah. And if we can acknowledge that from the get-go, I think we'll be okay.
Yes.
I think it's also important for a person that's not of color, and they're seeing someone who is of color, to acknowledge that they don't have the answers, number one. But number two, do your own education.
Yeah.
If I'm a client and I'm going to a therapist and I've seen a therapist that was not of my race, and I don't want to have to explain everything.
Yeah, and I think that's probably one of the biggest things is that as black folks, we have our different type of nuances. We have our different types of words. I'm thinking about my sister. Different types of words, different things that we say, right? That in a non-black space, I'm going to be the educator, and that's not what I want to be in therapy. Exactly. And so to go back and answer the original questions, yes, I think a non-black therapist can help a black person. A non-black therapist can help a Mexican person. They can help.
Why is it too that, like, if we can help them, they can help us too?
For sure.
So I think we got to kind of get out of that. My dad says this, and I think it's very important, and I really appreciate that he says this. He says, not every white person is against you, but not every black person is for you. And I think that, right? Like, that, it kind of hits, because we think when we do this when we, like, at the mall or at a restaurant or whatever. Yeah. We'll see another black person. What do? Yep. Nod. Like, yep. Okay, good. Yep. But you got to think about it. Like, sometimes not every black person is for you, and not every white person or person of not being black is not is against you.
For sure.
So there's got to be some type of mold breaking we have to do, because we can coexist. We do.
Of course.
You know
what
I mean?
Yeah.
And so it would be behooved of us to just be like, you don't know my race, you can't help me. That's not the reality. People go to school for this.
Right. And that's the point that I was going to make. I think at some point we have to trust that people have been educated enough to be able to help us in those spaces.
Yeah.
Again, they may not know all the nuances and things like that. So I understand it. I get it.
For sure.
If you're going in therapy, it's like, I don't want to be an educator. I just want to be able to sit with somebody and tell them about my story.
Yeah.
And so that's why I can see why someone who's Black or even someone of Hispanic heritage or culture or Asian wants to sit with someone who looks like them because of that reason. So I get it.
And there's nothing wrong with that.
Right,
there's
at
nothing
all.
wrong with that. But I think it's important for the therapist to acknowledge that we have cultural differences.
Cultural humility.
And we will never be fully culturally competent to understand someone else's race.
So true.
We will never. Like, I will never be fully competent to understand a Hispanic household or an Asian household or even different religions.
Right.
Like, we won't. I work with someone who is Muslim and where they're celebrating Ramadan right now. And so they're fasting from sun up until sundown, and they have to eat at certain times.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, I don't understand it. That's not my preference in my religion, but I can respect it. And so that's the other thing. Let's respect each other.
That's good.
Respect each other.
All right, so let's go to the second part of this question. Can a therapist who has not gone through something that their client is going through help them through that? And so I know that you said this was sort of kind of hard. So I want to take a slab at this one first.
Okay, great.
And I will say yes, they can. And the reason for that is because as therapists, we get trained in how to help people get to their goals.
Right.
Not necessarily, or it's not necessarily about us being able to relate to what they've gone through.
Yeah.
Most of the time, a therapist will not share their own personal experience with their clients.
Yeah, they'll choose not to disclose.
Disclose, yes. Yeah. And so with that, a therapist, we're trained to be able to get the information that you give us, help you to create goals, and help you to reach those goals. That's really what therapy is about. In that, there's processing, there's different interventions and strategies that we utilize to help get to that point.
Yeah.
But just because as a therapist, I don't know what it's like to I don't know what it's like to be separated from my mom or my dad at the border. Doesn't mean that I can't sit with a kid who's telling me, I was separated from my mom and dad at the border, and I don't know how to deal with that.
Yeah.
Right. But and I'll speak to therapists too. Like, if you're having a hard time connecting with that client, think about just the emotions that they might be feeling in that moment. We've all experienced loss and grief of some sort.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So we can connect with them in that aspect, right?
Yeah.
But, I don't have to know what it's like to be sex trafficked in order to work with someone who's been sex trafficked. Right. I think it's the same thing as that cultural humility, being able to go into the situation and say, how can I help you?
Yeah.
What is it that I can do for you to help you get to where it is that you need to be?
Yeah. And I think one of the things I tell my clients is that I may not be the therapist for you.
That part too, knowing your limitations.
Listen, come on, man of God.
Knowing your limitations. Like,
yes.
One of the things that I learned about therapy and I appreciated about therapy is that I got into therapy because I felt like I gave people really good advice.
I did too.
What I learned with being in therapy is shut up. Shut up and listen. Like, if I took nothing else away from being a therapist, I've learned to shut up and listen. Yeah. And I don't always have to have the answers.
And I think that's a misconception we have in therapy, and sometimes even people coming into therapy is that the therapist has the answers.
And
we don't have the answers.
We don't.
That's not my job. My job is not to give you the answer.
It ain't.
It's just not my job. My job is to walk with you
through the process
and to help you process and help you make decisions on what you're going to do. But that's not my job. Do you know how heavy that would be?
Listen,
the responsibility.
Nope.
Like, if I told you break up with that person,
That's real solution focused. I might say that. I'm just kidding.
I'm not gonna say
no,
that.
but yeah, there's a weight to that.
There's a lot of
Like
weight.
imagine sitting before a couple, or sitting before a wife, or sitting before a husband, and they're like, "I'm struggling with my marriage. I don't know if I want to be a part of it." And you just say, "Well,
Leave
divorce."
'em. Yeah.
Like the weight of that. Yeah, that's not us. That's
No.
not what we're here for.
I don't want that.
And so, in saying that, that's why I think as therapists, we can support people that are going through things we may not have gone through.
Yeah.
Because it's not necessarily about how we can give them the answers to get out of it, but it's how we can support them while they're going through it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good questions.
Awesome. All right, we're gonna keep going. We got a couple more.
Oh, we do. Oh, okay.
Yes. So the next one is it possible to pass trauma through generations? Ooh, give me my book.
Whoop. Oh, it is right with you?
Give me my book. Yes. Yes. So this is a book that I'm reading right now. I'm gonna let you go first.
Okay.
But yes, we're gonna talk about it a little bit.
Okay. So is it possible?
Is it possible to pass trauma through generations?
So here's the thing about passing things down. So I think something we have to realize is passing trauma can look like passing behavior.
Ooh, let's sit right there for a second.
We're sitting.
Let's sit right there for a second because that's good.
Yeah.
Passing trauma could be passing behaviors.
Yes.
And because this is a holistic approach to it,
Well,
passing habits.
Overeating.
Right? Hello, eating. My God, today. Right? So we want to, and we're going to get into the psychological aspect of it, but because we have been spending a whole lot of time there, I want to get into the biological aspect of it. Like high blood pressure, diabetes, cholesterol, all those different kinds of things. People
Put the salt down, y'all.
put it down.
You tell me that all the time, though.
That's why I looked at you. But a lot of it, there are certain illnesses and diseases that will say, oh, it's a part of not generational. What's the word? Where it's
I don't know.
The word where it's like it passed from my parent.
Oh, like I got it from my. Oh, I know what you're trying to say.
There's a word for it, and it's skipping my mind.
Yeah.
But it's really habitual.
Yeah.
It's habitual. It has to do with you taking on the same habits as those that came before you. So your grandparents struggled with high blood pressure, right? And your mom and dad struggled with high blood pressure. Now keep in mind, you eating the same thing that your mom and your grandma have eaten, or your dad and your grandpa have eaten for all these years, and then now you go and get a checkup and the doctor says that you have high blood pressure.
And you'd be like, what?
How? Me? Of course you, because you eating the same thing they did.
Yeah.
Right? So
even like a religious aspect to it. Like,
Yeah.
okay, so theology, like, get that demon out of my house.
Yeah. Or even our religious beliefs. Like being Christian. Like I was sitting and talking with a friend one time and he was just like, I want to get to the point of understanding why I'm Baptist. Because am I Baptist because my mom and dad are Baptist, my grandparents who were before them are Baptist? Is that why I'm Baptist? Or am I Baptist because I believe these principles of being a Baptist, right? So yeah, like things are just habitual.
Yeah. So passing trauma is passing behavior, and then it's also creating certain environments that were.
All right, so sorry about that. We had to clear some technical difficulties. So we were talking about, can trauma be passed down through generations?
Right.
And you were talking about how behaviors and environments can be passed down. So you want to continue there?
So I think past behaviors are what's modeled for you. So growing up, if you see your parents yelling and screaming, and that's how they communicate in a marriage.
Talk about it,
when
Doc.
you get into a marriage of your own, all of a sudden you start going off at the mouth, that, and you're like, and
you start doing what?
That, and the other person's like, what is this? And you don't even know sometimes where it comes from.
Right.
So that's a past behavior. You watch someone do something and you watch the consistency of that pattern of that behavior.
Yeah.
And now it's become your own. You've adopted it and adapted it to becoming who you are.
Yeah.
When in reality, it's not who you are, it's what you've seen.
That's good.
And it's the comfort, what you know. And so, and sometimes even environments. So for example, like, I have a hard time, so I'll disclose. I have a hard time in silence.
You disclosing?
I'm disclosing. I have a
You
hard
have
time
a hard
in
time in
silence.
silence.
I have a hard time in silence.
Why have I never known that?
So I commute. You know,
Probably because I talk too much.
No, I commute to work. Right. I have a hard time just sitting in my car, silent.
You know what's interesting?
Huh.
I used to be the same way, and now when I drive places, I barely listen to music.
It's not even listening to me. I need to talk to somebody.
Okay.
I call Crystal, my mama, you.
Yeah.
I'm on Marco Polo. Like I am.
Ooh,
talking.
while you driving?
Yeah. No shade. But like I'm talking to Megan, like I can't sit in silence. But that's because I grew up in an environment where it wasn't always quiet. Or there were times where growing up, my parents worked, you know, like my parents commuted for work and different shifts. So there was times where I was home by myself. And so I didn't like being by myself. I have a hard time sometimes being by myself. And I'm working through it in therapy.
Okay.
But like that's an environment. So I'm learning how to deconstruct that environment for myself.
That's good.
So it's not necessarily like a past trauma, but is a past environment that I need to do. Because there's nothing wrong with being by myself.
And being in silence.
But I'm working on it.
I got you.
Yeah.
So to continue with this question, right? So I'm reading this book, and I was actually talking to my sisters about this and my mom a few days ago, and I was talking to them about this book. It's called "It Didn't Start With You."
It's a good book.
And oh man,
it was recommended to me.
I read like the first couple chapters, and like I could just sit right there for like, I swear we could do 12 episodes on just that. But it talks about how traumatic experiences. So when people experience trauma, there's a scientific aspect of it as well. When people experience trauma, it actually, one, depending on where the individual is with their brain development, it can change the structure of the brain. It does something to our DNA and RNA as well. But what's the
RNA?
I don't know what the word is, but it's a part of the DNA. No, if I knew, I would have just. You got me on camera. I just play it. No, I don't know what RNA stands for, but I know it has something to do with the DNA.
Amen.
But the part that really got me, right? Now this part, like I'm telling you, when it got me, it put me in a chokehold, and I actually posted about it. But it says in the book that us, you and I,
yes.
right? We could be significantly impacted by the traumatic experiences of our grandparents, and that's good, but it gets better. So it was saying that, so for women, right, and when they are developing in the womb, after a certain age in the womb, still they already have all the eggs that they'll ever produce.
Yes, that's
right.
Correct. Yeah,
and so this blows my mind. It's just. I just get really excited. So your grandma,
yes, Joyce,
hey, could have been pregnant with one of your aunts.
Yes,
right.
Let's say Rhonda, Auntie Rhonda.
Could have been pregnant with one of your aunts, Auntie Rhonda, and let's say your grandma was pregnant with Auntie Rhonda, and I don't know, she's about 6 months.
Okay.
Pregnant. And Auntie Rhonda is already developed in the womb, right? So she has all of her eggs that the fetus has all the eggs that they'll ever, like I'm excited saying this, has all the eggs that they'll ever produce, right? Yeah. And Grandma Joyce might have experienced a traumatic experience that's going to impact her as the person. It's going to impact Auntie Rhonda in the womb, and then it could also impact her eggs. So one of her babies in the womb.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Like, that blows my mind, because when you think about one of the new things that's coming up now is how scientists are starting to say that people whose ancestors were slaves are the ancestors or the. Man, I'm getting so excited.
It's okay.
My mom tells me that when, and she's seen it on the podcast, when I get super excited, my brain will move, but my mouth is not like moving fast enough to keep up with it.
Really? Because sometimes I feel like you talk really fast.
I do, but like my brain is still moving faster, so I'm not like getting the words out the way I want to. Yeah. But the descendants of those African slaves can still experience some type of traumatic or adverse effect because of that. Like that's scientific evidence right now. And And so that's what this book was talking about, like how when people experience a traumatic event, they can pass that down to their descendants, the generations to come after.
And that's why it's so important. That's why I always tell people, like, you don't know what you're carrying.
Mm-hmm.
We never know what we're like carrying, and we could be carrying. This is the other thing. Sometimes we carry other people's burdens. We can carry other people's trauma, behavior that's not ours, and that's heavy.
It is.
It's extremely heavy, and we're not supposed to carry that.
And you know, that also speaks to the responsibility for those individuals. I'll say just for us, like for people, to make sure that we're addressing our traumatic experiences.
Well, what do you always say?
I was gonna get to it.
Okay.
I was gonna get to it.
Get it.
The thing that I always say, and I'm going to repeat, I don't know where, I think the Lord dropped this quote into my spirit because I have not seen anybody else say this before. But the trauma was not your fault, but the healing is your responsibility.
Say it again, Pastor.
The trauma was not your fault, but the healing is your responsibility, because you have people coming, you have kids, you have generations coming after you that can experience the traumatic events or the impact of that trauma after you.
Yeah.
So it's important for you to own that and take responsibility in addressing those traumatic events so that you can live a full, whole, abundant life.
Yeah. Life with the life that brings you great things. And I think that's the other thing. Like, we are created to live abundant life, like abundance life. And who's stopping us from that?
Yeah. Us. Yeah.
No one else is stopping you from it. It's just you. Sorry.
Yeah.
It's just you. So live that abundant life that God has called you to. We're not created to do life alone, number one. So go see someone. Number two, we're created in his image and his likeness. So the behaviors and patterns and environments that we have adopted, those aren't really our behaviors and patterns that we're supposed to adapt. So adapt what God has called you and created you to be. And then live that life. Walk in that healing.
That's good.
Walk in that, walk in that healing. It's important. Why wouldn't you want to walk in that?
Yeah. A lot of times we're the ones holding ourselves back from experiencing that abundant life.
Don't do it.
Now, you know, so with this podcast, right, I know I talk a lot about how like our mind will impact our body, or how our body, the things that we put in our body can impact our mind. And I would be remiss if I did not acknowledge that there's a spiritual aspect to us. And yes, there are spiritual things that can impact us, right? And so I say that to say that it's so important that as we're living this, trying to live, if there are hindrances, things that are coming up, I'm always going to point folks back to Jesus. And I love the fact that we can promote ourselves as Christian therapists and that we can use that in our sessions and use that in therapy. But I say that to say, because I know that you were saying that sometimes we're the ones that are the ones hindering us from living that abundant life. Sometimes there are things going on in the spiritual realm as well that could be hindering those things. And our way of addressing them are the same. Yeah. We go before the Lord. And like I said before, we acknowledge him in all of our ways, and he's going to direct us. Yeah, it's important. I think we don't realize there's things going on in the heavenlies. And the Bible talks about renewing our mind, right? And that is part of therapy. Like, you have to reconstruct the way your brain thinks. It's also gospel. Renew your mind daily. Daily. And this is why I always say Jesus and therapy go hand in hand. They go together. Because it renew your mind, reconstruct your thoughts. All in one. It just makes sense.
It makes sense. Yeah.
It makes sense. Yeah. So I think those are all the questions that we have. My baby has to go do her thug dizzle.
I gotta go to therapy, y'all.
She gotta go meet with somebody and sit on the sofa with them.
Thank you so much for having me on.
Baby, thank you for being here.
I appreciate it. This was fun. I hope we could do it again. I hope we can talk more about just our lives. And I'm very proud of you. I'm so proud of you as your wife, and just seeing you in your element and seeing you just glow and talk about what you're passionate about is such a beautiful thing. And I'm so proud of you.
Thank you, baby.
I love you.
See, she know how to get me emotional.
I do know how to get emotional.
She had me crying on the sofa on Monday.
I'm so proud of you. I really
am.
And how you have done this podcast and how you've just like gotten the equipment, getting it figured out, calling Larry, but like
Yeah.
also like you're breaking things for our daughter. And I am so honored and proud.
You better stop.
Okay, we'll stop there. But I love you.
I love you too.
I'm very happy and proud of you.
Thank you, baby.
Thanks for having me.
Do me a favor and tell the people again. I know we said it at the beginning, but let people know how they can connect with you.
Yeah, so you can connect with me. I'm on psychologytoday.com. Just type in my name, Brittni Williams, Brittni, Williams, the way it sounds. I also am on Instagram. If you find me on Instagram or find me on Psychology Today, you can send me a DM if you want to just send, like, we can meet personally. I can give you my email or my phone number that way. I don't mind. I'm not tripping off of that. If you crazy, I'll find out. So,
and I know she's also in the process of building her therapy Instagram page as well. Yes,
working on that. It's in the works. But yeah, you can find me on Instagram as well. Brittni.Williams, AMFT _ APCC therapist.
Yes. So thank you so much for joining us on our first segment of Ask the Therapist.
Yeah. This was fun.
Yes.
I had a lot of fun with this.
I did too. Yeah. I did too. So y'all, that's it for this week. Join us again. Join me again. Join us again it's a family here, right? So join us again next week for our next episode of Uproot the podcast. Listen, if this episode has helped you, has encouraged you, have given you some answers, some tools to help you deal with some of the things that you might be experiencing, go ahead and leave a comment, leave a like, share, subscribe so that you know when our next episodes are hitting the internet. Thank y'all so much for joining us today. Peace.
Bye, y'all. Thank you.